Hello, my name is Shirgi, and in this video I'll be talking about one of the most important things to me when it comes to writing my music. And that is the importance of balance. Balance can mean a lot of things, but since I write orchestral music in sort of the classical style, I'll be talking about what balance means to me and also in an orchestral music context. I'll be using some of my own music to demonstrate the importance of balance and how to achieve it. This is a piece of music that I wrote just last night. I've been having some musical writer's block for a while now, and out of actual frustration, I just pulled up a new MuseScore file for an orchestra, started jotting down notes, and eventually it evolved into this. So I spent all of today polishing it up, and I'll be now using it as a tutorial for you. I've intentionally modified this piece a little bit just to demonstrate my points. So as I'm playing this for you, I want you to actively listen for something that feels like it's missing, feels like it's lacking, or something that just feels a bit off. This piece is a canon, which means that there are multiple melody lines playing on top of each other. I'm not very used to writing canons, nor am I some sort of expert on counterpoint. This was mostly just, again, some sort of emotional outburst, but that's besides the point. So first I will play you my excerpt and then I will discuss it afterwards. Okay, so there's another part here that I haven't quite finished writing, but that's not important. What felt like it was missing or that it was lacking? If you aren't familiar with the concept of balance, it might be difficult to pinpoint what exactly feels off or empty or even emotionless about this kind of music. And it's not necessarily repetition that is in itself boring. There's plenty of music that's very repetitive, but it's not boring. So first let me talk about what balance is, and then I will talk about why this music is lacking balance. Balance does not necessarily mean that the instruments are all at the same kind of perceived volume. I know the name can be a little bit misleading because balance makes you think of like a scale where you're trying to get the two ends to be the same level, but that's not the case in music. Balance is the placing supreme importance on the melody. The melody is the main driving force of emotion in your music. It is what your audience is going to hum when they think of it. And because the melody is so important, you need to make it feel important. How do you make your melody feel important? Well, you have to make it louder than everyone else. That is why this music is lacking balance right now. It does not place enough importance on the main melody. And because I have ignored the importance of the melody, as a result, the music feels kind of confused. It doesn't know what its goal is. It doesn't know what emotion it's trying to evoke. And that's another thing I'll mention right now, but we're going to run into as we start to edit this music, is that because there is counterpoints and there is a main melody, we're going to have some kind of compromise. There are other melodies playing too that we want to hear, but we need to quell them in order to favor the main melody. Although you might want to hear the intricacies of all of your counter melodies, especially if you have a lot of them in a canon or a fugue, you are going to want to place more importance on your main melody, even if that means not quite being able to hear the other melodies so nicely. And you can try to make all of your voices in your fugue or your canon sound alike, but if you don't place importance on one of them more than the others, then your music is just going to sound kind of confused, as I have just demonstrated to you. I would also like to point out before we begin that the quote-unquote main melody is kind of a nebulous idea. In a fugue or a canon, you might think of it as the principal theme, and this is a great starting point, but it doesn't always necessarily have to be that. Although in a lot of cases, well, it is. This music starts with some pianissimo low strings, which I quite like, and I think it's okay that they're playing nice and quiet because they're the only things playing, and it's the beginning of the piece, so they can be as quiet as they want. However, as we start getting into some counterpoint, things are going to get a little bit more complicated, as now there are two melodies playing on top of each other, and we need to choose one that we want to emphasize. Usually you're going to want to emphasize the main theme, so I'm going to take all the instruments playing this main theme, which are the cellos and also the bass clarinet, which we'll get to. I'm going to make them just a little bit louder than the counterpoint, using piano instead of pianissimo, which is 1 degree higher. So up here in the bass clarinet, I will also make this a tiny bit louder. Now when we listen to this excerpt, the counterpoint will be slightly less noticeable, but the music will have a more clear goal because we have emphasized what the listener should be paying attention to. Although I would also like to stress that this kind of importance does not just apply to counterpoint. It also applies to when you're writing a melody over chords. You don't want your chords to be louder or even just the same volume as your melody. This particularly applies when your melody is in the lower register and your accompaniment or your chords or counterpoint is in the higher register. Higher register melodies will just be easier to hear on their own, even if they're at the same volume with the accompaniments. I still think that you need to boost the volume of the melody a tiny bit more, but particularly if your melody is in the lower end, your ears are going to have a bit harder of a time hearing that melody above everything else. But especially when your melody is in the lower pitches, you're going to want it to be louder. If your melody happens to be somewhere in between the highs and lows of your accompaniment, like if it's one of the middle voices, like the tenor or the alto, then super duper importance needs to be placed on the melody then. Because if your melody is like smack in the middle, then if everything's the same volume, how is your ear supposed to know that you're not supposed to be listening for the highest voice or even the lowest voice? How is it supposed to know that you need to listen to the middle voices if not importance is placed on it? So here, despite all of this counterpoint, I think I'm going to still keep everything else at pianissimo while I make the main melody piano. And again, I will be raising the volume of the principal theme. So in the horns here, I'll make it piano, and also the solo cello here, I'll make it also piano. Although we already have 2 phrases, 8 bars of the same melody planned, so maybe it's time for a little bit of a change of pace. So I'm going to make the melody here even louder. I've raised the cello and the horns to mezzo piano, and I'll be increasing one of the counter melodies just a little bit to piano, but I will still be keeping another one of the counter melodies quiet. And I think the melody that I'm going to choose to be a bit louder is the new melody. So this melody that is playing in the bassoons we have actually already heard before. It was the development of the previous measure here. After this other phrase, it moves to this new counter melody. So I'm going to emphasize this a little bit. I already have a bunch of strings playing this. I am going to raise their volume to piano, And also the clarinets are playing this, so I'm also going to raise them. Now let's hear what this part sounds like now. The main melody here is being played by one clarinet, and one clarinet is currently going up against an entire orchestra. Because I have the entire orchestra playing on a relatively quiet volume, it is actually pretty easy for a clarinet to shine over everyone, so I'll be making sure that it does. I'm going to continue this mezzo piano dynamic from earlier, but I'm going to have it swell up to a nice forte. As for everyone else, they're going to get a modest boost in volume, so the pianissimos are probably going to go to piano. But while we have this main melody playing here, I do want to emphasize one of these other melodies a little bit more, just so you know. We have a nice fall off of the loud melody, then we have like a secondary melody that's a little bit quieter, and we have the other melodies which are the quietest. I do have this melody playing in the saxophone that I want to be a bit louder, so I'm going to raise it up to mezzo forte, whereas the clarinet here is playing nice forte. We'll just have the saxophone play a nice mezzo forte. I actually want to hear that saxophone a bit more, so I am going to raise its volume all the way up to forte, but I don't want to lose the importance of the clarinet, so I'm going to make that even louder at fortissimo. If I don't think that clarinet sticks out quite enough, I can just add other instruments on top of it. And so let's say that I don't think this clarinet sticks out enough, maybe I can add another instrument to help it out, like a flute, for example. Now, after this part, the main melody actually shifts all the way back down to the low strings, and of course I want them to be louder than everyone else, so I shall make them just a bit louder than everyone else at mezzo piano. Right now we're dying down, so I'm going to move away from the fortes and kind of move from a mezzo piano here to a piano later for the main melody, and then have everyone else be pianissimo. Let's emphasize that the melody here, the main melody, is in the lower strings, so I will put more importance on the lower strings here by marking them just a little bit louder than everyone else. Again, I'll choose a melody here to be my secondary melody. I've chosen to raise the volume of this counter melody here up to mezzo piano, which is the same volume as these strings. This is one lone instrument here, the oboe over there, playing the counter melody. It's currently up against 60 strings, which is violas, cellos, and contrabasses all playing together. You do have to be a little bit careful when doing that, but I'm just going to trust my orchestration instincts here that 60 string players playing at mezzo piano is going to be one oboe player playing at mezzo piano. However, if it turns out to be the case that the oboe sounds like it's overtaken the main melody in the lower strings, then I will go back and make the oboe quieter. So let's listen. And you know what? I'm feeling like this has got to be a nice, beautiful swell here. Kind of a dramatic one. Instead of the ones here that were 2 bars long, I want like a 1 bar one. And I do think that this oboe is at a good dynamic volume. It doesn't sound like it's overpowering the strings too much. Good, I like that a lot more. Now the main melody is being played by the English horn and the French horn. So I guess we have 2 kinds of horns playing, even though the English horn is not a horn. It's a woodwind instrument, and also it's not English. And by the way, the French horn isn't French either. The English horn is French, I think, and the French horn is actually German. And to make matters more confusing, the English horn is actually an alto oboe in F, technically, which makes this a horn in F, which is exactly what this is called. Now that we have both of our lyre horns playing the main melody, we're going to raise their volume a tiny bit, up to piano from pianissimo of the original. And I will be decreasing the volume of the counter melodies, so these guys on lower strings here, to pianissimo, so that the main melody can once again be heard above everyone else. Alright, I also have the cute little glockenspiel here tagging along, so I'm also going to raise the volume of that to piano. We are getting closer and closer to the climax of the music here, so things are going to get just a bit loud, and we're going to have the finale of this part here play much, much louder. But for now, we're raising the volume of our melodies. So the counter melodies here, I want them to play at piano dynamic, but of course, once again, place supreme importance on the main melody. Or do we now? Because I did say earlier that although supreme importance must be placed on the main melody is not always necessarily the principal theme, and I want to demonstrate that here. So instead of placing importance on what was previously our main melody, and it was only the main melody because we said so, but the main melody could be one of the counter melodies. It's just that we have to treat it as the main melody and then treat the other guys as the counter melodies. So for example, let's actually make it so that these guys here in the bassoons are the ones that are playing the main melody, and everyone else, and our principal subject here playing again in the clarinets and the flutes, is actually going to be treated as a counter melody now. By doing this, we're kind of breaking up a little bit of that repetition there, even though of course this melody is still playing, it just has received a little bit less importance, but making the main melody just a little bit different is going to make things just a bit more interesting in my opinion. So here, since everyone else is playing at piano, you guys are going to get the special mezzo piano, making you just a bit louder than all your peers. But to make things feel a bit more complete, I am going to have this last part here once again emphasize the main melody. So in order to achieve a big, big sound, I put the main melody in multiple octaves here in all of the strings. And I'm going to have them start at it like a mezzo piano, but they're all going to move to a big, big forte. There are also horns playing the main melody here, so they will also receive the forte treatments. Counter melodies here do risk being covered up, so although they should not be as loud as the main melody, but I still do want them to be heard, just not heard as clearly. So because I've put the main melody in so many instruments playing forte, mainly the strings, I can get away with putting one of these counter melodies all the way up to forte as well. And I think I'm going to choose this nice oboe melody, which is also being played in the horn here. So I'm going to raise these guys to mezzo piano and then to forte. Everyone else playing counter melodies though is just going to stay nice and quiet. So I hope you could hear through the little tiny bits that I've been playing phrase per phrase that the music has been getting steadily much more interesting. Finally, I'm going to play this excerpt for you one more time, so I want you to actively listen out for all of the changes we have made. Not only have we put in more dynamics to our music, but also we have put lots of importance on the main melody, which is going to more clearly define what the goal of our music is. So I hope you enjoy our new and improved version. Thank you for watching this lesson about balance. I hope that you learned what balance is, how to achieve it, and why it is so important. And I hope that you will think about balance actively as you write in music in the future. Please subscribe to my channel. You can also join my Discord server in the link in the description below. And I will see you guys later. Bye bye!